by the military-industrial complex.
It could be seen to move violently forward, violently forward, violently forward.
I'm just a patsy.
Let's win there.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAP.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so
Exactly.
That's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
And we're back. How you doing, George?
Great, Peter. How are you?
I am pleased as punch to be here. But you know, there's all kinds of furniture moving around, though. Right before we started, and I don't know how this will affect our conversation, but I thought, let's just start with this. Apparently, the SEC is investigating Rumble. Which doesn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form, based on the accounting of Rumble. Actually figuring out how much money you're actually making on Rumble is sometimes kind of like, I don't know. It seems more predictable to go into Vegas and like put money in a slot machine and like pull the handle than to figure out how much money you're making in Rumble, because you go and you check the stats on it and they go up and down kind of at will. And then you send Rumble notifications and you ask them what's going on, and they don't explain it. And then what else happens? There was one other thing I was going to say. Anyway, in any case, it doesn't. And then you look at their help wanted ads on their website, and all of the people that they're looking for are people in finance, right? And now they're being investigated by the SEC. So that's not a surprise to me. But it does impact what we do to get our message to you, out there in the viewer, because we're constantly dancing around from platform to platform. And you on your Substack today, I get your last Substack. I don't know if it's published today or yesterday. You're gonna reboot the neighborhood news studio. So you want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think we ended the last show with the reprisals against creators. And I think this is just another one of those Peter Strzok, hey, my wife, Melissa Hodgman, hey, honey, why don't we just go get all those creators at Rumble now that they've all left YouTube? There's a slaughter pen at Rumble now. So, yeah. So one of the things I have done is as we turn toward the election, and hopefully we'll have something semblance of an election, we resurrected the old neighborhood news because they can do a 2-hour, 3 times a week show, and where we can, kind of cover the whole campaign, and we can do all this deep dive stuff, and we can do these charrettes and all this stuff. And now we've gone to an all virtual model, so we don't have the brick and mortar problems anymore. And we've got Andy DeBala.
Only Peter Strzok can steal your server.
Right. I mean, we're still trying to keep the balls moving in such a way that they can't, come seize our backup server. But yeah, that actually happened in Michigan. So I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen, but we have Andy and
I think it happened at Dado Corporation too.
It happened at Dado with Mark Kulak, yeah. And we have Aaron in Michigan, and we'll have the first hour will be solid news, and the second hour we'll have more We have now America's Frontline Doctors. We have the only real America's Frontline Doctor, which is Comerdoc. And so we have her in Michigan there. So we're
you don't really want to mix her up with, aren't the actual America's Frontline Doctors having some kind of, I mean, I understand you're making a play on words there, but their reputation isn't great right now, is it?
Oh, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
We're cleaving off the only doctor who's a real frontline doctor. It's sort of the same way you would keep the heart.
Maybe you should rebrand them the real America's Frontline Doctors.
Yeah, well, we've, I agree with you. It's sort of like you keep the heart and you remove the heart tumor. You don't want the heart tumor, and you don't want the people who buy $2 million mansions in Sarasota, and then that's not enough. So they buy another $2 million, and then that's not enough. So then they need a private airplane to fly around. So that's what America's Frontline Doctor money went toward. So we're trying to say that no. She's now with Neighborhood News. She's an American Frontline Doctor still. She still speaks at all these conferences, but she definitely doesn't like what happened to the money that went to Washington and went to Florida. And so the second hour we'll attack things like neighborhood health and neighborhood other subjects. So it'll be a nice format, Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Right, and then you and I are gonna we'll continue on Tuesdays, and then we actually have a couple of other things scheduled too, with Chris Newby. We're going to talk to Chris Newby about her book Bitten, and I don't remember which day that is, but I'll find out. But yeah, on this show, on the Duke Report with George Webb, we're going to start doing it on Tuesdays, and we're going to go longer. Instead of the 3 days a week. And that way I can finish my book, which is kind of my primary. We're in January. It's time for switching things around. So yeah, we'll be doing this show with George on Tuesdays from now on.
We'll still do special events for interviews that lead directly to the reframing book. But Tuesday is your time to tune in for the 2 hours of Duke Report the whole way.
Indeed. So today you wanted to talk about Epstein Island and the news in Epstein Island. So what is the news, George, on Epstein Island?
Well, if you've watched Rupert Murdoch's Wall Street Journal, they've had two, what they call drops. Okay, two big news drops, and it's regards a treasure trove of new documents, of course, always right in the election cycle, for Jeff Epstein. And what we've already seen is they're sort of releasing the metadata, and they're sort of eyedropping out the metadata. Things like, well, here's Jeff Epstein's calendar. Here's Jeff Epstein's, plane log. Here's the rest of the plane log we didn't show you. And they're not showing you the actual
the cover and the brads they use to hold the pages together.
Yeah, the back description of what's inside. And I, like other journalists like Whitney Webb, have said, hey, release all the documents, sort of like the domain documents with Robert Malone of 2020. If you're going to be repurposing a whole bunch of drugs for one disease, and you're going to be repurposing it for coronavirus, and we're all dying from coronavirus, supposedly, let's share all the documents. I mean, we're not in a competitive battle here. So,
well, that's the metadata is the drip strategy, right? Which is that instead of just releasing them and letting all of the journalists kind of go through them, they do a few pages at a time, and that's to control the news cycle. That's exactly right. That's to take a story that well, first of all, it's to take a story that may not actually be a story and have it take up the news cycle for many days, right? Or if there is something in there, to obfuscate it by it's kind of like a Friday dump. When you take information, you dump it out on Fridays, then you have the ability to miss the news cycle. So timing things for the news cycle is interesting, and the strategy at which things get released winds up becoming the metadata that you should probably pay attention to.
Absolutely. We reported a story a while back, and it's very tantalizing, these documents, where
You said it. You said, is it the Fox? Is it Sky News? Where do we find it?
Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal.
And I'm not sure who the Wall Street Journal reporter is, but Wall Street Journal, if you look at Epstein Trove or Epstein documents, and they're going to look at things, they're going to take well-known names like Noam Chomsky. Okay. They're going to pick on Noam Chomsky because everybody knows Noam Chomsky is a liberal, right? If you do a compound search on Wall Street Journal, Epstein, and Noam Chomsky, you'll see that they had 3 lunches. Well, I don't really care, that much about Noam Chomsky and 3 lunches at MIT. He was obviously being used at MIT as like an intermediary to introduce Jeff Epstein to the intelligentsia of MIT, right? I care a lot more about the dozens of meetings with Ehud Barak. Now, even Jason Goodman gives me credit, right, for me calling out Ehud Barak and calling out the Mossad operation in Congress and the Mossad operation with Jeff Epstein and Mark Epstein in Congress in 2017 on his roof. Even at Jason Goodman, says, well, George did say Ehud Barak was running the show on Capitol Hill. And it turns out that, yes, there's dozens of meetings with the head of the Mossad, with Jeff Epstein. And then Leon Black, we've talked a lot about Leon Black with the Apollo group, stealing nuclear fissionable materials for Israel, doing bioagents for Israel, creating all this kind of dark weapons market. Leon Black with the Apollo Management Group is in there dozens of times meeting with Jeff Epstein. This was the stuff that we were saying in 2016, and everyone was saying, oh no, it's about child trafficking. Another thing is the Southern Trust. We talked about Southern Air Transport. Jeff Epstein and Les Wexner took over Iran-Contra for Bill Barr after Bill Barr shut down Iran-Contra. Then it became Southern Air Transport at Rickenbacker Airport in Columbus. This is the Southern Trust, which is basically take Southern Air Transport and it's in investment in CRISPR and targeted genetics for DNA genetics. And we have in this testimony now from 2012 of Jeff Epstein, you'll hear him talk like you've never heard Jeff Epstein talk before. We're bringing in the Nobel scientists. We're getting the best scientists out of Harvard. We're getting the best scientists out of MIT. We're going to sequence your genome, Mr. Elite Person. We're going to give you cancer immunity. We're going to let you mate with the stars.
This sounds more like Alan Dulles collecting scientists, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's a front. It's a front for a CIA operation in targeted genetics, I think. And you know what it really sounds like? It sounds like the domain program that Bob Malone was running and the DARPA program, because the big idea is take the 25,000 homeopathic things that we know work, bring them in, sequence them, change them just slightly, and then now they're new and novel, and now patent them, and now use mass formation psychosis to destroy the old things, like they destroyed the fish tank cleaner with hydroxychloroquine, or ivermectin was horse paste,
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Chomsky, because I'm just one of the things that I did in my research assignments this week is that I'm writing a chapter in my book right now called Storytelling versus Critical Thinking, and my thesis is that the battle for the minds of men at this point is between people who present evidence-based information or scientific information that can be reproduced. That is, somebody tells you something and then you can go and you can prove it. If you put your hand under the tap and turn on the hot water, it feels hot. That's something that everybody can go into the bathroom right now and prove. As opposed to storytelling, which is a lot of what we get on the news, a lot of what we get from government officials is stories, things that we need to take experts' words on whether or not these things are good ideas or not. And this is all backed up by word magic. Contracts and patents are word magic, whereby words that are arranged in a certain way on a page mean that this use of this product is legal and this use of the product is illegal. That's all kind of magic. So in my kind of writing this, in doing research for this chapter, there's a document that I keep coming back to, which was written by Lyndon LaRouche in, let me see, I don't want to lose my place. It was written like Lyndon LaRouche, I think in the 1970s in something called The Campaigner. And he wrote this essay called Secrets Known Only to the Inner Elites. And it's funny that you mentioned Noam Chomsky's, because Noam Chomsky's name, when you brought it up, put me in here. And he's talking about basically the conceit that LaRouche makes is that the two power elite groups that are basically in battle for control of the planet are the Aristotelians on one side and the Platonists or the Neoplatonists on the other. And the Platonists represent the critical thinkers and the Aristotelians represent the storytellers in Peter Duke's kind of oversimplification. And yes, I'm going to be accused of oversimplifying everything in this book, which is why I'm going to put it into the preface that I'm guilty of oversimplification, because that's what I'm trying to do. But in this document that so I've taken LaRouche's Secrets Known Only to the Inner Elites, and I did the same thing that I did with self-power and the illusion of democracy. I put it through GPT paragraph by paragraph, and I simplified it. And I'm going to be posting that on the Duke Report Buy Me a Coffee, if not today, in the next day or so. But here's a paragraph where he's talking about, this is Lyndon LaRouche as interpreted by GPT. It says, he's talking about Bertrand Russell. He's saying Russell also advocated for mass mind control through scientific technology, including the use of drugs, a project manifested in psychedelic drug cultures. His involvement in developing linguistics, particularly through the work of Noam Chomsky, represents an extension of synthetic religious cult building techniques. Chomskyan linguistics systematically excludes the cognitive use of language, echoing the philosophical outlook of the cult of Dionysus. So it's interesting that you bring up Chomsky, because I'm thinking that, you know, LaRouche is talking about Dionysus, and Epstein has his little, you know, temples on his island and stuff. So I'm wondering whether or not Chomsky, you know, it's more than him just being a liberal or being a liberal mouthpiece or being a liberal kind of icon, as much as Chomsky being brought in kind of like Joseph Campbell with the Club of Rome or something, Changing Images of Man, and they're asking him how to frame certain ideas in order to be able to sell them through when they wind up perpetrating them on us.
And Peter, this is your gift to the world. You change the cosmos with this methodology. I mean, we've got this thing that's been defanged. You did it with self-power. Self-power, you can get it on Amazon. If you don't just spread this among all your friends, you're making a big mistake. It's the best thing you can do for $10 that I can ever imagine giving somebody else. But you did it with the Truman, giving Truman a voice after Kennedy was killed. These are his most private thoughts a month after Kennedy's killed, with the Truman statement, sort of the military-industrial complex thing that Eisenhower said. Now you're doing it again. Right. Now you're doing it again with LaRouche. And this, for the people who follow LaRouche, what happens is LaRouche is so intellectual, he's such a smart guy, and he brings in so much history and so forth, and there's so many third-party illusions and so forth, people can get bogged down and lose the thread of what he's actually
He's such a spurg. Like he makes you and me look like he makes you and me look like Wally on Leave It to Beaver. Like
he makes us look like Lincoln, you know, yeah. Like if, you know, the plain spoken rail splitter, you know, talking at the country fence post, you know,
right.
I mean, and that is really a service right there. But there's so much juice in LaRouche. This again is a great service to mankind. And this, I don't know if you're going to do another booklet.
No, I'll do it as a booklet also, but for members of the Duke Report, I'm going to just post this thing on Buy Me a Coffee. and you'll be able to read it. But I do have it in a format where I could actually easily make it a book. Also, the reason I wouldn't make it a book is because it really is LaRouche's content, right?
Right.
I'm reinterpreting it. And so I don't really want to get involved in it. And it is a PDF that you can go download off of the internet. It's on the Internet Archive. But if I go and I try to make money on it, then I think I may wind up in some kind of a trouble, and I don't really want to do that.
Okay. I do want to say on the reporting, that we're not speculating about the relationship between Jeff Epstein and Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky was the introducer or the interlocutor for Marvin Minsky at the MIT AI lab. And the key idea here is they wanted to use AI to figure out why an antigen and an antibody go together. And then they wanted to figure out if they could alter the algorithm to make it better. If that doesn't sound exactly like what Bob Malone was doing with Domain, I don't know what does. And you will hear Jeff Epstein, and we could even put Jeff Epstein's voice to this, of his testimony that says exactly what I'm saying. No speculation. And we had reported the Duchess of York, not your Duchess, not Lady Jessica, but the Duchess of York, Fergie, who was married to Prince Andrew. She had a longevity pathway foundation and on the island, and was doing these presentations for immortality and longevity and cancer immunity and so forth, along with Dr. Eric Braverman. We reported on this in 2016 and 17. It was called the Path Foundation, this longevity path presentation. So it's finally, we're seeing the documents now 7 years later. This is what this was about. This is what Zorro Ranch was about in New Mexico. This is what the Stone Mansion was in New York, and also in Florida, in West Palm Beach.
Yeah, Zaganostra is saying that Nietzsche's first book, The Birth of Tragedy, set the tone between Dionysian and Apollonian in art and music. Yeah, and LaRouche goes into that in this document also. Yeah, it's interesting how all of these threads are coming together. I know that it to a lot of people probably sounds disparate, but as I try to simplify the things that I'm looking at, it all starts to kind of present itself as obvious to me. And like I said, I'm continuing to read this book, The Incubation of Nazism, and the manifestations that are going on right now in finances, and all of the people coming over borders, and even the Albert Pike of it. I think that the next thing that I might put through GPT is Albert Pike's letter predicting 3 world wars, because those things are all kind of dovetailing with things that are in this book. And I look at what's happening with people flooding over the borders right now, and the economic shenanigans that are going on with the Federal Reserve and inflation. And I'm thinking that they're just transposing certain things that they did in Britain and Germany and France in the 1920s, and they're doing them with the United States and China and perhaps Israel at this point. So it's kind of it's illuminating and shocking all at the same time.
Well, speaking of illuminating and shocking, in these documents, these 4 documents, speaking of Dionysian and Apollonian, there was certainly the Dionysian bacchanalian activities of Epstein Island, but then the Apollonian ideals of, what beautiful child you might have, But the key partners of this
that will make, what beautiful child will make.
We have all these supermodels. They have all these eggs. We have all these Nobel Prize winners. They have all this sperm. The world is literally your oyster here on Epstein Island. But the billionaires that are in the subpoena of this Southern Trust are very interesting. You've got Sergey Brin, whose wife, Wojo, had 23andMe. So they have this whole massive 23 million person database that they can look at rare diseases and cancer, foibles in your genome. That was one of the people. I mentioned the guy with Ortiz, I can't remember his name, with Disney. I spoke about it to you earlier.
Michael, Eisner? No, Eisner. Michael Ovitz. Yeah. Right. Michael Ovitz. Who's an interesting cat in Hollywood, because before Michael Ovitz was the president of Disney, he was the super agent whose position was kind of taken in Hollywood by Ari Emanuel. Like, Ari Emanuel was always a big agent, but when Michael Ovitz moved out of that spot, then Ari Emanuel moved in. And of course, the Emanuel brothers are Ram, Ari, and Ezekiel. And Ezekiel has written basically the euthanasia documentation for the UN. So, you got to wonder what their breakfast routine was like when they were 7, 8, 9 years old. What was dad telling them at the breakfast table?
You wonder if this is somehow like AI generation for each child, or AI generation for their other Disney properties. I realize that Disney owns ABC, and so there's a whole bunch of stars in the constellation of Disney, but this is an odd pair, if you will, Google and Disney together. But then you throw in Pritzker, who was the Secretary of Commerce that's named as one of these billionaires in the documents. They're delayed the full document dump until January the 22nd, so we won't know about all these names. But I just think it's very interesting to see that some of the things we said in 2016 and 17 with Dr. Eric Braverman and Duchess of York, now all these documents are coming out and showing how much, we talked about Boris, I can't remember his name, that was in with Bill Gates, investing in CRISPR. He's on the front of my book, The Corona Man Cometh. And all this, focusing and targeting the human genome either against our enemies, with Stan Pottinger writing this book called The Last Nazi, or to give us life extension, is really happening in these various locations. This Freenome is this company that he's getting $200 million for, just, sort of like Theranos, just out of the blue, he gets $200 million because this one genome cancer project that he's working on. That's just one example in these documents.
Right. Well, you get that much money because whoever's writing the check is going to get something out of it. There is a quid pro quo there.
Yes.
One of the ways of looking at this thing, though, that again, I'm factoring these things as I'm writing my book, is that all of the people who are showing up at Epstein Island are either handlers or assets, right? You don't have any true believers. You don't have any of the prisoners of the cave showing up unless they're sex slaves. But the people who are showing up are either people who are in control of programs, or people who have enough control in their own right that whatever it is that they're in charge of, whatever science they're in charge of, whatever manufacturing component they're in charge of, they need to be brought into line. Either their stuff needs to be controlled or acquired in order to be able to move the world controller's agenda forward. And so we don't really hear a lot of what I like about this conversation, what you're bringing up, George, is that we don't hear a lot about, well, why would the president of Disney and a guy who used to control all of the talent in Hollywood be talking to a technology guy? Like, what are the conversations that those two guys have about how they work together? Are they talking about creating, for example, AI actors and actresses? Like, are they determining whether or not the state of the art of the technology is good enough that they can get rid of Julia Roberts forever? Like, they don't need her anymore. And is that the kind of nature of the conversation that they're having? And then again, how do you grow something that is an idealistic Apollonian form in the virtual space, and then in situ, right? How do you create it in the real space? Are you using the creative modeling in in virtue. Am I using that term correctly?
I think you are.
Yeah.
I think or in silico might be a better
In
word.
silico, yeah. In
Yeah.
silico, right, yeah. How do you create something in silico as a model for what you're going to create in situ, in real life?
It's sort of the Peter Duke. It's AI-ing Peter Duke, because Peter Duke has a human model come in, and then Peter Duke does his lighting and his costuming and makeup and so forth, and then he makes this person a more ideal form, an Apollonian form of the person that walked in the door.
Right.
Now, how do we do that for every elite that comes into Epstein Island, and how do we take our stable of actors, all of our Disney kids that we have 10-year contracts with, how do we leverage them, even doing AI of how they might grow up and look when they're grown up, and then own the right to that character? This was what the whole writer's strike was about, is the ownership of your likeness as far as its AI-ness, if it goes on to make a series of successful Netflix series or whatever. So it's very interesting.
When I first met my wife, we were talking about we were talking about what I used to do for a living, being a fashion photographer and stuff. And she was talking to me about how it really bothers her when she's talking to a man and a woman walks by and the man's gaze goes off. And I said to her, it's math. And because it is math. Right.
The guy has to try so many times to get a date. Is that what you're saying?
No, but there's a weird thing that happens when a certain shape goes into your peripheral vision. Okay. I have to believe that it's phi, it's the golden mean. There's a reason why the shapes of certain human beings attract more attention and are considered, there was a study, actually this model that's a friend of mine was on the cover of, I think it was Time Magazine or Newsweek 20 years ago as the most perfect face, because scientists had figured out what the perfect mathematical relationship was, and her face happened to match the model better than any of the other models that they could find at agencies, and so they put her on the cover. And the thing about that is that it does have a lot to do with the golden ratio. It does have a lot to do with all of this kind of ancient math, and we have gotten to a point with AI where you can type in, a beautiful woman is doing this, right? And the AI will just create it, and it assumes that a beautiful woman is a certain mathematical proportion. And it's they haven't discovered it yet, but I'm waiting for wokeness to get to the visual part of AI, because it definitely has what I would consider like a 1970s bias towards beauty. That is not, somebody's saying geometry, not math. Okay. Gets, what I mean.
Well, it's interesting because, sometimes it's the imperfection that makes the model beautiful. Lauren Hutton had the gap in her teeth, her front teeth, but she's I know you're going to go back and say, okay, let me pull out my pictures I took of Lauren Hutton. But you know what I
Even
mean?
better, George. Even better.
Better.
Keep going. Yeah. Keep going.
But there are other models that don't look, there's something different about them that makes them memorable. And I think also that's in the AI, and they haven't figured that out yet, which is good, because it's, and then the other, there you are with Lauren Hutton.
There's Lauren. Yeah, I wanted Lauren Hutton and I worked together for a couple of days, and I said, "Can I have my?" I rarely do this, but I said, "Can I have my picture taken with you?" And she said, "Yes, but only if I get to hold your head." And I said, I was a kid at the time. I said, "What?" And she said, "Get on your knees." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Do you want your picture taken with me or not?" And I said, "Oh, I got on my knees." And then she like put my head under her and she like leaned over and she told the photographer, she said, turn the camera. It'll look like he doesn't have a body. And the photographer started laughing. That was the picture. So anyway,
that's a great picture. That's a great picture. Well, since you've shot Lauren Hutton, you know what I'm saying is she's not classically, they would say, oh, that's an imperfection. You know, the gap in the teeth, that's an imperfection. And she would flaunt the imperfection. And, you know, there's various other, you know.
Well, the imperfection creates a certain interesting psychological effect. And that is perfection is intimidating. People who we perceive as perfect, which is why people have such a hard time going up to celebrities and talking to them, because they have a character or a perfect model in their head. And when they go up to them, they can't really deal with them like they're a person. And that imperfection allows that person to be approachable, somebody that you could go up and talk to, because they're not perfect, right? And it changes the frame in somebody's head.
Yeah, Uma Thurman, you know, has that kind of je ne sais quoi approachability, even though, you know, Kill Bill and all that sort of thing. But the other, just to move off of beauty and AI for a second, and go back to the Epstein billionaires, because I think there's something about the metadata in the Epstein billionaires that's interesting, with Thomas Pritzker owning Hyatt hotels.
Okay.
Right. I don't know if that means compromising all the Hyatt hotels or not, but he's in the deposition. He's going to be subpoenaed, and he has been subpoenaed. And then the other one that's coming is the billionaire Mort Zuckerman, New York Daily News, and New York Daily News, I think, is a part of the, you know, the whole thing that's owned, you know, by Rupert Murdoch. So there's a person who can get the news out, if you will, the old kind of loose, you know, organ or Wurlitzer that Alan Dulles.
Yeah, the mighty Wurlitzer, right?
Yeah. So it's just an interesting group of people that got subpoenaed, and I have to give Whitney Webb credit on this. She's the only other person talking about this. She's the only other person talking about these 4 billionaires and the subpoena and the documents and so forth. So I got a hat tip to Whitney.
Right. Well, and that's why I'm kind of excited to see, you know, what happens with Neighborhood News Studio, because we need to figure out a way to you know, the subtext on this show today, or the subtitle was Bright Shiny Objects. It's like people are so interested in the math. I'm sorry, the geometry of the sex stories, right? The pedophilia. That's why I you know, that the whole idea. Oh, he's a pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein pedophile. No, he's not a pedophile. He's a influence merchant, and he's using sex as a lever in order to influence business, government, and technology to move into the direction that he wants it to move into. And that's the real story. That's the big story. So, you know, trying to figure out why Pritzker and Noam Chomsky and Marvin Minsky and Larry Page and all of these people are getting together and having conversations. You know, what's the fly on the wall? Those are the tapes that you want to see. You don't really care about the sex tapes, because a sex tape is a sex tape. Like you can get free porn on the internet that's probably better than anything that Jeffrey Epstein recorded. The conversations that they had at the dinner tables, that's the juice, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in these tapes, it says that Epstein managed, I think it was when he was with JP Morgan, managed the money of Bill Gates. And Bill Gates did set aside, now we had said that Bill Gates was on this helicopter with Jeff Epstein to Haiti, and on this helicopter going to the Zorro Ranch a long while back, also to the Epstein Island. And it's Jeff Epstein with his inside knowledge of what the military-industrial complex is going to put their money into. That's why Bill Gates gives him the money, and that's why Epstein's managing his money. And that's why Bill Gates had dinner with Epstein 70 times, right, is because they want to manage this fund that's being invested in these CRISPR DNA targeting technologies. So, and then there's this, so I wrote about this in a book called The Corona Man Cometh. And this guy who was managing the fund was called Boris Nikolic.
Is that on your Substack?
Yeah. You can. I should go put that link out there. But Nikolic, just think of somebody licking a nickel, is the guy, and he's named in this lawsuit. And in the documents, it actually says Jeff Epstein says he was managing Bill Gates's money. You know, so that's way bigger than Jeff Epstein. Yeah, there you go. Now I cut Nikolic out of the picture for the book cover, but you'll see Nikolic referred to, and you'll see that Jeff Epstein, through his kind of Mossad connections, has the inside line on what technologies are going to be invested in. Here's where I went down near the island, and I went to Biden Island as well. Biden is also there, James Biden, on this water island nearby. And it's the juice is coming in. The receipts are coming in with these latest documents. There's Danny Rothschild, the head Mossad intelligence officer, you know, helping our government and DOD decide what to invest in. So, right. Yeah. So then
our government. You mean the one that we pay for? I don't think it's our government. I just think it's the one that we pay for.
I think Lloyd Austin is compromised, our current defense secretary, and we pray for him. He's in the hospital now, and there's no second in command that he named for cancer, prostate. But this is the thing: is you get the top guys compromised at places like Epstein's Island, and then you're basically running the DoD and the budget for the DoD.
Yeah, it's we live in interesting times, as the Chinese would say.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know what you want to talk about next.
Well, I think taking questions, maybe.
All right, very good. Here we are. Let's see. Scott Crowley says, do you know who Rachel Chandler is and her connection to Epstein? I don't know who she is.
There are a couple of people who say that they were victims of Epstein but seem to work closely with Epstein. Then, you know, like these are the sex slaves who then get turned into operatives. And then later, you know, after the death of Epstein, they say, I was, you know, being his operative against his will. There's currently this girl who was a 16-year-old who knew how to fly all these planes. I can't remember. She supposedly has sort of disappeared, and I believe Rachel Chandler is one of those types. I don't know more than that right now.
Right, and again, whoever she is, she's not a handler, right?
No, I think I think with all these, all I know is there's some kind of scandal with Balenciaga, and Balenciaga's this Spanish, you know, Balenciaga from the fashion business. Here's her picture with Bill Clinton. That's all I know about Rachel Chandler, other than she's pictured with Bill Clinton. And she, I think, says she was, Rachel Chandler, professional photographer and modeling agent, was reportedly involved in casting process for Balenciaga. I guess that's the movie.
It's hard to be a photographer and an agent. I had a modeling agent who was my photography agent once, and he only represented me for a few months because photographers started calling him up and saying, why should I give you my list of clients if you're also why should I tell you what clients I'm working for if you're also representing a photographer? And he had a very good argument. So I got dropped from that agency, but not because he didn't like me, but just because it was going to wreck his modeling agency business. So somebody calls themselves a photographer and an agent is kind of a built-in conflict of interest.
Yeah, it says here, Balenciaga recently took to social media to issue a new statement about the latest scandals regarding its controversial ad campaigns. the company came under fire for their gift collection campaign that featured children.
I remember that.
The children are seen posing with branded plush bear purses, wearing outfits that some critics said called the themes of BDSM and bondage. And the bears are, chained up and have neck things. And
yeah, and there was a big controversy too, because Kanye West, I'm going to call him Kanye West. Sorry, Ye, I'm going to call you Kanye. Was claiming that he liked Balenciaga, but that he was a Christian, and that he still liked Balenciaga, even though they were doing these weird things. And then, famously, he was doing, appearances with Nick Fuentes and Ali Alexander and Milo Yiannopoulos. And then shortly after that, Kanye did there was a lot of controversy, and Kanye got banned off of social media, and he lost a couple $2 billion in contracts, but he continued his allegiance to Balenciaga throughout the entire thing. And then eventually he did a party, I think several months ago, where he had naked women that were dressed only in crucifixes up their behinds. And at which point I think Nick Fuentes let Kanye know that he wasn't particularly approving of that behavior. But so there's Balenciaga is a weird brand, and again, I look at these things like what were the people who create Balenciaga, the person who created the brand in the first place. I don't know if they're still alive or not, but my guess is that this is probably not an idea that they would go with. What winds up happening with these fashion companies is that almost like everything else, almost all fashion is owned by like 3 different companies. There are 3 different companies that own every major fashion brand, and they're all subsidiaries, and there's holding companies that hold all of these things. And my guess is that Balenciaga was the designated brand for doing this kind of satanic, masochistic thing. And it was done by a designer. The designer at Balenciaga who did it, I believe, used to work for Kanye West. So there's that.
Apparently she has some connection with Eminem.
Eminem, Detroit's finest, or Michigan's finest, right?
Yeah. Michigan won the Natty. Congrats out to you guys.
Michigan won. Somebody said it looks like there's an attempted coup taking place in Ecuador. Did you see that video, George?
No.
Oh, here. Apparently, some terrorists took over a TV station in Ecuador. This is the kind of footage that you get on Twitter nowadays.
Que se vaya la policía, que se vaya la policía, que se vaya la policía, que se vaya. Dile que tenemos bomba.
I think this is an ad for Tommy Hilfiger and Nike, it looks like. So there's a bright, shiny object for you.
Yeah. The last time I was in Quito, I was at the, I went to the government building had the foreign affairs for Julian Assange, and I dropped off some information. I went there every day for about a week, try to get the Assange information to him through diplomatic channels and so forth. I found Quito to be a very placid place. There wasn't a lot of unrest. There wasn't a lot of demonstrations that you would normally.
I wonder if this is all cover for seizing some Assange records or some Assange communications, like grabbing
Yeah.
a government ministry building or
Continuity of government.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's my first thoughts went to. We're going to throw continuity of government in because they took over a television station. Now we're going to destroy all the Assange communications. Yeah.
You only see that. You only see that here, folks. You only see that in government. You know.
Well, I mean, all that still is a matter of record. You're going to be able to see what I took down there in 2009, 2010. So it's a matter of record.
Sure.
So the only way to get rid of it is to have these jamokes come in with Nike outfits on. I'm not saying just me. I'm just saying anybody who's tried to communicate diplomatically with Julian Assange. It would be a matter of record at the embassy.
Sure. Yeah, and so that would be the only building that would get taken over. Would be the intelligence or actually two buildings, either intelligence or the State Department building of Ecuador. Right? They'd go in there and grab all of the.
And then you'll find they put down the thing after all the records have been destroyed. They put down the rebels, and the rebels are dispatched.
Oh, I see. So it's
end of continuity of government.
So it's a school play.
Yeah.
It's a school play. I get it. Right.
Yeah.
So for people who aren't connecting the dots, let me connect the dots. I'll put it through not the GPT, but through the PGD, which is Peter George Duke. What George is saying is that if you have a lot of records in Ecuador that you are afraid might embarrass you about Julian Assange, one way of destroying those documents might be to have terrorists take over the building, trash the place, and then oopsie, as George Webb would say, all of the Julian Assange documents are suddenly disappear, or they're corrupted, or something like that. That's what I think George is suggesting.
Yeah.
Is that correct, George?
Yes. And I think there's a lot of communications. People don't realize that back in 2008, 2009, when WikiLeaks was just getting going, or even back to 2005 with collateral death, that helicopter video.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of people sending things through the diplomatic channels, through the Ecuadorian embassy, both directions.
So it's a treasure trove. It might just be like the attack on the museum in Baghdad after the Americans entered Baghdad. The Baghdad museum got sacked by some mysterious military unit that nobody knows about, and a bunch of I think Sumerian tablets, something like 40,000 Sumerian tablets or something disappeared. I can't remember exactly
what
it was.
Intelligence agency, and you want to get at what was going back and forth between the diplomatic pouches to London,
right?
This would be a great way to get
right. And putting these TV people on TV with a shotgun aimed at them is going to get everyone in the world looking at the TV station. All attention is going to go to the TV station. So some other building that's off in the other part of the country isn't going to get very much attention.
And it's all right on a central mall, right on the top of this plateau in Quito. It's all on a central mall, and one end's a TV station, the other end's a government building. So that's the perfect, Oval is over here, and then here's the Capitol over here, and here's Trump making a speech over here, and here's the guys going over the wall.
So all the cars are going to be going in this direction, and all the action is going to be right behind them, right?
Yeah, the Eric Braverman explosions,
For people who are watching Ecuador out there, let us know in the next couple of days what other buildings were impacted by this takeover.
It couldn't be the government buildings, because the government buildings, all those guys have, they're armed to the teeth, and there's many of them, and these guys all would have been.
But it could be a feint, though, that if you want to pull all of those people away, and you said it's at the opposite end of the mall, they might leave minimum forces. Although if they think that there's a coup involved, they might be bringing in truckloads.
Yeah, the junta, the general group that runs Ecuador they don't care about some reporter getting killed down the street. They're not going to let their security forces leave them. But I agree with you. They'll be pulling in people from the barracks and combing that place with machine guns.
Right, exactly. JBGT3 says, have you guys tried to invite Whitney Webb for an episode? No, but we can. There was an issue. Whitney had an issue with something that Daniel Hopsicker said, and now Daniel Hopsicker is no longer with us, and we weren't able to corroborate that for her, which we did try to do. But we could try.
A good time. I think it'd be a good time to have Whitney on. And you know, if I'm the cog that, because I was the one who was interviewing Hopsicker, you know, you interview Whitney.
All right. Well, I'll see what I can do. How's that?
Yeah. Because I think her angle on this story is also going to be interesting because she wrote the 2 books about Epstein,
right,
and Maxwell, and I think she's the one who really understands the compromise. You know, she wrote about all these people, so she would be another person, another angle, another perspective.
All right. Let's see what we got. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do 3 things at the same time. Zaganostra says Nietzsche's first book, The Birth of Tragedy, set the tone between Dionysian and Apollonian in art and music. So I have to go check that out. And then he follows up with Magog and Gog from Ezekiel. And just remind you that Ari and Ram's brother's name is Ezekiel. And Revelation was referred to by ex-Israeli defense minister, as did Papa Bush justify ME, military intervention. What's ME? I don't know what ME is. Somebody in the chat will tell me.
You need to check private chat. There's an update to that Ecuador story.
Oh, there's an update to the Ecuador story in private chat, which I'll bring up here. And it says deleted this tweet as the Ecuadorian police say this information is false. Is that what you're...
We've already defanged this misinfo.
Yeah, reports of.
Oh, that's maybe a different thing. It says hostages in the subway.
Oh, yeah, but the hostages in the subway, it says that they've already.
Middle East. If people are saying ME is Middle East.
Oh, ME is Middle East. All right, very good. All right.
Well, first of all, Apollonian to dystopian or Dionysian.
Yep.
I think I've experienced that all in one night, right? So, you know, I think that's how parties are.
It sounds like a Fellini movie.
All parties start out as Apollonian. You're going to help somebody somewhere, you know, and it's a great cause you're there for. By the end of the night, it's Dionysian. So I think that's the way of all flesh. Let's just leave it there. But as far as the Middle East and the Poppy Bush and the intervention in the Middle East militarily, could you put that comment up again? Because I didn't quite.
If I can find it, yeah. Can you? We'll try to restart.
Let me look at the chat here. I got the chat going.
Hang on. I'll keep looking.
I didn't quite get because we didn't know what ME was. I didn't quite get the gist of it.
I'm going to do Command FME and see if that helps me find it. Anyway. I apologize for losing that. The chat management software that we've got, we are always kind of struggling with a little bit. In the meantime, somebody said, "Does Peter know the Italian design house Iceberg?" No, I don't. And Zaganostra said, "Fibonacci numbers architecture as frozen music." Yep. Understood. That's what classic.
Oh, I got it.
Classic architecture.
It was Magog and Gog.
Yeah.
Ezekiel and Revelation as referred to an ex-defense minister as Poppy Bush did to justify the Middle East intervention. So they're saying there's some kind of Talmud.
She put it up there. Yeah.
Yeah. Some kind of, there we go. Some kind of Talmud or Revelation, the book of Revelation, saying that this land would be returned to Israel, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and I think always you can find something in the Bible, right, that, and pick and choose and cherry pick to say that whatever you're about ready to do is biblical prophecy. This one is probably a little stronger. I mean, it's pretty clear the promised land will be returned to the Jews. So there's a stronger case here.
Well, it's interesting too, because I'm trying to find this part in this LaRouche thing that I'm working on, where he's talking about he's talking about the creation of the Jewish religion and how his analysis of it is that it is basically a concoction of the Babylonians. Here's what LaRouche says. And again, this is my GPT interpretation of a document written by Lyndon LaRouche called Secrets Known Only to the Inner Elites by Lyndon LaRouche. He says, now we had, again, and this is, I'll put up a trigger warning. This is going to trigger a lot of people. This comment by Lyndon LaRouche. He says, now we address the influential hoax of the Jewish religion. The modern Jewish religion, contrary to popular belief, originated centuries after the Kingdom of Solomon as a synthetic cult created by Babylonians and other non-Jews. It began by combining Mesopotamian legends and propaganda with bits of Babylonian and other history, later reworked under non-Jewish supervision with the structure of the Old Testament completed during the Persian Empire period. This religion was introduced into European languages around 230 BC by the same Aristotelian Peripatetics who developed the exotic cult of Ptolemaic Egypt on orders from the Ptolemies. The translation, known as the Septuagint, I can't pronounce it, was written in a form of Greek commonplace in common places like waterfront brothels of Egypt. Philo of Alexandria attempted to create a Platonic version of Judaism, did not discard the existing texts, but reinterpreted them through commentaries. The Christian apostles, facing similar challenges, emphasized the dispensation of Christ and warned that against dangers of the Old Testament, maintaining only those sections relevant to Christianity. So that's a completely different frame than I think that most people are used to seeing.
Yeah, and I'm not enough of a Bible scholar, and I've gone over the Book of Revelation a lot, but I think this is the Magog and Gog is not. There's differences of opinion.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that when I publish this thing, like I said, in the next day or two, you'll be able to tease out the answer to those questions in looking at this document, at least the Lyndon LaRouche version of it. Again, we're dealing in a story versus empirical fact kind of environment, and Lyndon LaRouche has lots of citations for the things that he does, and he goes back to original sources. Lyndon LaRouche is the guy who goes back and reads things in the original Greek. Like he doesn't mess around with interpretations for people, but yeah, somebody says you gotta know your Aramaic. Indeed. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's funny because I was thinking about the book Sexual Persona by Camille Paglia, because Camille Paglia in that book, I think that's the first time that I ever read about the battle between the school of Apollo, which was all about men and roads and walls and rules, and the Dionysian, or as she talks about it, the Chthonian nature of the feminine, which is comfortable in the miasma and the ooze of reality, as opposed to men who always want things very straight and ordered. She puts it as a kind of a feminine versus masculine battle, which I think is fascinating.
Well, I know why we need to go to once a week, so I can study up, and so I'll be ready.
Me too. Because I kind of feel like we do a couple of hours of drinking out of the fire hose, and then as soon as our mouths stop hurting, we go back and do it again instead of kind of thinking about what it is that we just had a conversation about. So
yeah. There's a lot of thinking here. I had my Greek classics my first year of Miami, so I mean, this is the Wayback Machine needs to be dialed up. If you
well, one of the things one of the things that he talks about, which I think is again fascinating. Let me look for the word air, because he said part of the charade. Air. I'm looking for the word air. He said part of the charade that Cambridge and Oxford have pulled over the rest of the world, and kind of is that the secret knowledge is the name of this chapter. It says the core knowledge guiding the British intelligence services is a quote unquote secret knowledge rooted in the classics, centered within an inner intelligentsia of the oligarchical elite at Oxford and Cambridge universities. Understanding the classics and their practical implications, which few do, reveal this secret knowledge as clearly as the letters impose story to someone who knows what they're looking for. He's talking about he referenced a Poe story called The Purloined Letter, which I have not read, but now I've got to go read Poe's The Purloined Letter. Evidence of the gap between what Oxford and Cambridge know and what they publicly profess is exemplified by the case of Anaximenes, 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 a Greek philosopher. It is commonly believed that Anaximenes identified air as the primary substance, but the Greek term that he used aligns more with the concept of mind or spirit. The mistranslation is so blatant that it appears to be an intentional deception. Yet those who repeat this interpretation, even with PhDs, have not been corrected by the institutions of Oxford and Cambridge. So it goes on to say that, we're taught that the four basic elements are air, earth, fire, and water. But what LaRouche says in this documentary, Intimates in this document, is that air is really mind or consciousness, and fire is actually energy. It's not fire. It's not literal fire. It's the idea of energy or controlling energy. And in that framework, kind of, you look at all of the people who have been running around, the Rockefellers, and you look at all of the controversies around oil and uranium and all of those other things, and you start thinking, well, yeah, if it's energy and not fire, then there's kind of more universal aspects to these things. And if air is not the air that we breathe, but actually the thing of which good are the ideas which spawn life, then a lot of these Greek philosophies wind up having a completely different interpretation, which is fascinating to me.
So you're going to come out with an AI version that's going to help me understand this.
Okay.
Right? Is that the deliverable here? Because
let me finish writing my book first. I'll put it on my to-do list. But maybe I need to put it into this chapter. To your point.
No, I love it. I mean, it's a lot of great ideas, a lot of intellectualism, and I need to bone up on this stuff.
Well, I'm trying to bring it down to a practical level, though.
Yeah, I like that.
Because if it's not fire, it's energy. Then and we look at all of the emphasis on. I mean, look at the history of the last 200 years has been. And here's an idea that I had that I was playing around with, and this will be the first time that I've actually said it coming out of my mouth. I haven't even talked to my wife about this. Is the idea that if you understand that there's two kind of power structures in place, one requires critical thinking in order to invent things. So you have hard science, right? You can't invent a steam engine without knowing something about metallurgy. And you can't invent any of these things without understanding pressures and mathematical formulas and geometric shapes and all of those things and how they work together in order to create something as simple as a steam engine, or as even simpler, a nuclear reactor, right? Because it's really just a big boiler. But what winds up happening, you have somebody like Nikola Tesla who claims to create. Well, I won't confuse things with Tesla. You have a steam engine, okay, and a steam engine requires energy. So you've got coal, and then coal winds up becoming not as efficient as oil. And you've got Winston Churchill, who shifts the Navy over from coal to oil, right? All of these things are inventions that wind up having to have stories put around them in order to control them. That is, you have to, or what I would call word magic. So Rockefeller so somebody figures out that oil is worth something. Rockefeller is very good at getting oil out of the ground. And so they use word magic in the form of leases, okay, and then money magic in order to control this thing that is a naturally occurring thing. That is, oil coming up out of the ground produces energy. The process for taking that energy and turning it into something useful in mankind is harnessed and controlled using word magic in the form of contracts and patents, right? And then money magic in the form of cartels and marketplaces in order to be able to control that stuff. So you have this constant tug of war between the people who are inventing things, okay, that are really and this is what LaRouche, I think, talks about as far as and Matthew Ehret talk about as far as the genius of man, is that our ability to create new things is seemingly limitless, except for the constraints of the word and money magic that are put around the inventions that are controlled by the oligarchies in order to make all of us into slaves. That's kind of my thesis.
Okay. Well, I'll wait, for the distillation or the refinement or the synthesis.
Right.
Because there's a lot going on here. I'm just reading the Wikipedia for this sexual personae, and this woman Camille Paglia, only wrote this in the 1990. So this isn't like an old work, but she's addressing artists like this: Donatello, Botticelli, I'm familiar with those. Leonardo da Vinci, got it. Edmund Spencer, I think the Fairy Queen or whatever.
There's a lot of Fairy Queen in her stuff. Yeah.
Peter Moore, William Shakespeare, got that. Goethe, okay, got it. Samuel Coleridge, I'm not as familiar with Coleridge, but I don't know, romantic guy. Lord Byron, another romantic poet. Emily Bront, romance writer. Oscar Wilde, I'm familiar with him. Nietzsche, I'm thinking of a nihilist, or nothing is, you know what I mean? There's a lot going on here.
Yeah,
Each one of these is a big idea in itself, but then you throw them all into this big ball of wax, and it's really complicated. That's my initial reaction.
She's fascinating. She, it's interesting because when I used to work as a photographer, I used to say, so I worked at a place called the May Company, and it was basically a factory where we just pumped out photographs all day long for catalogs and newspaper ads. And, the models and hairdressers and makeup artists would come in one end of the factory, and the film would go out, and it would turn into pictures and get spewed out into the universe. And I would sit in the dressing room sometime with, it was a big dressing room with, there'd be a half a dozen models in there, and a couple of hairdressers and a couple makeup artists and a couple of stylists, and they're all hustling, bustling, and getting everybody dressed and ready to go. And I would sit there kind of like as a fly on the wall, because my job didn't start until everybody got on the set. And I would wonder, what were all these people doing in sixth grade, that got them all in this room at the same time? Because the hairdressers definitely had a completely different life trajectory than the models. and had a completely different trajectory than the stylists. They all kind of come from different directions, and they're all meeting. And it wasn't until I read Camille Paglia's book, because she talks in the book about how the idea that the word homosexual, in the archaic sense of the word, didn't mean sex with one own's sex. It meant sex for one own's sake. That is, if you were bonding with somebody of the opposite sex in order to procreate, that was heterosexual sex. But if you weren't bonding with the express purpose of creating another life, that was homosexual sex. And it occurred to me that you could be a straight homosexual and that all of the people in the dressing room were actually homosexuals, and that's what we all had in common. So that was one of my kind of takeaways of that book.
Oh, well, I've been introduced to a new author, and so I'll check it out.
She's great. If you want to watch something funny, and maybe I should pull it up, Camille Paglia is the world's, I mean, there was that guy who used to do the Federal Express commercials who could talk really fast. But Camille Paglia talks faster than him. And
now, that seems to be an antithesis to understanding, because each one of these things is like got their own theme and their own message, right? And if you throw them all together really super fast, it'll make your head swim.
Well, that's why reading Camille Paglia might be better than listening to her. But let me just show you for a second.
No, I'm interested in hearing what she sounds like.
Okay, this is Camille Paglia and Jordan Peterson blowing smoke up each other's asses. But I'll warn you. So here we go. Okay. And now it's not playing.
And men, most particularly from the psychometric perspective. One is that women are more agreeable than men. And so that seems to be the primary maternal dimension as far as I can tell. It's associated with a desire to avoid conflict, but it's associated with interpersonal closeness, compassion, politeness. Women are reliably higher than men, especially in the Scandinavian countries and in the countries where egalitarianism has progressed the farthest. So that's where the difference is maximized, which is one of the things James Damore pointed out quite correctly in his infamous Google memo. Okay, women are higher in negative emotion, so that's anxiety and emotional pain. That difference is approximately the same size. And again, that maximizes in egalitarian societies, which is extremely interesting. And then the biggest difference is the difference in interest between people and things. And so women are more interested in people and men are more interested in things, which goes along quite nicely with your car anecdote. But the thing about men interacting with men, again, is that it isn't that they respect each other's viewpoints. That's not exactly right. What happens with a man, and I know a lot of men that I would regard as remarkably tough people for one reason or another, and everything you do with them is a form of combat. Like if you want your viewpoint taken seriously.
I'm sorry, I found this, but it's all Jordan Peterson talking. So let me go find something else.
Yeah, did you let her talk?
Yeah, I mean, it's, well, here's the whole interview.
I've really been trying to understand the underlying psychology of postmodernism and its relationship with neo-Marxism.
Let's get her.
Derrida and Lacan and Foucault.
Well, my explanation is that there is no authentic 1960s point of view in any of the elite universities, okay? But rather the most liberated minds of my generation of the 1960s did not go on to graduate school. I witnessed this with my own eyes. I saw genuine Marxists, okay, at my college, which was the State University of New York at Binghamton, upstate New York, Harper College, which had a huge cohort of very radical downstate New York Jews, okay, who, in fact, the Harper used to be called Berkeley East. So I saw genuine, passionate Marxists with my own eyes. They were not word choppers. They were not snide postmodernists, right? They were in-your-face aggressive. They used the language of the people. They had a populist energy, okay? They dressed working class. They were non-materialistic, okay? These are people who lived by their own convictions. They were against the graduate schools. When I went on to graduate school, and it became known that I was going to go to Yale, I was confronted by a leader of the radicals on campus in broad daylight in front of everyone, who denounced me for, he said, grad school is not where it's happening. You don't do that. If you have to go to graduate school, you should go to Buffalo. Now, I had applied to SUNY Buffalo because the great leftist critic Leslie Fiedler was there, who had a huge impact on me. He created identity politics, but without its present distortions. Right? And Norman Holland, the psychoanalytic critic, was there. I would have been very happy to have gone on to Buffalo, but I needed the library at Yale, so I continued on to Yale. There were no radicals in the graduate schools, right? From 1968 to 72 when I was there. Only one radical, Todd Gitlin, okay, went on to have a career success. Okay? The actual radicals of the 1960s, okay, either went off, dropped out of college and went off to create communes, right? Or
Wasn't Noam Chomsky a radical? I think he was kind of a radical.
or they were taking acid and destroyed their brains. Now, I have also written about that, the destruction of the minds, okay, of the most talented members of my generation through LSD. It was going on all around me. Right? So what's happened is the actual legacy of the 60s got truncated. The idea that these post-structuralists and postmodernists are heirs of the 1960s revolution is an absolute crock, okay? What they represent, as Foucault shows, Foucault said, okay, that the biggest influence on his thinking, okay, was Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, okay, which was a post-World War II play written in Paris that was about the disillusionment and nihilism experienced after Hitler went through, occupied France, right? And all of Europe was in ruins. It had nothing to do, what's in Waiting for Godot has nothing to do with the authentic legacy of the 1960s, which was about genuine multiculturalism, a movement toward India, toward Hinduism, a transformation of consciousness through psychedelics, which I did not take, but which I identify with totally through the music, etc. Right? It was a turn toward the body. It was a turn towards sensory experience, okay, not this word chopping thing and this like cynical removal from actual experience, right? That French import, okay, came in, okay, to the graduate schools. It did not affect any genuine 1960s person. The real 1960s revolution was about Jung. It was about a way of seeing the cosmos in mythological terms, right? And the Jungian contribution went on into the New Age movement of the 1970s, aside from the universities, right? So who took over the universities were these careerists. Okay? I saw them with my own eyes. I saw what happened. I was at Yale when Derrida was being shipped over, right, to address the students, the grad students, and the faculty. And I said to a fellow student after hearing one of these guys speak, it wasn't Derrida, it was another one of the theorists. I said, they are like high priests murmuring to each other. This was an elitist form from the start.
They're Apollonian priests. They're the cult of what's it? Mithras. It's Mithraic.
Peter, I just want to say, I think I found my niche. A gumshoe reporter worried about getting the gum off his shoe. Copying down license plate numbers, doing Google searches, going to libraries, finding staking out chop shops after midnight, going to the hijacker hotels. I found because I don't play in this game. I'm not their pay grade. I can't handle this many concepts going at this speed. I got to have something.
Well, I think it's interesting that she was going to Senyap, the State University of New York at Binghamton, and her friends were telling her, "Don't go to Yale." What did they know?
This is why I wade into Little St. James and almost have a shark encounter. I feel very good about my tangible, concrete world. I don't play in these ethereal, intellectual planes. So, but
bringing this back to Epstein Island, don't you think she's talking about how all of these that the real 60s experience didn't have anything to do with any of the grad schools, and that's because the elites who run things weren't part of the hoi polloi. that what she's describing as the real 60s experience is on the true believer prisoners of the cave level of Peter Duke's, epistemology, and that the assets and the handlers are up at Yale and in the grad schools telling all the people below them what they're going to do.
I understand you a lot better than I understand her or Jordan Peterson. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, I'm always I'm always trying to figure out a simpler way. And maybe it's because I have the ability. I just look at it as shorthand. Like I could read Lyndon LaRouche's paper, and I got 90% of the value out of it reading it just because I put my finger under the words and I continued reading a sentence until I knew that I understood that sentence, or I would go look something up. But putting it through GPT, the prompt that I used was paragraph by paragraph, simplify this content to the level of an American high school student. Without losing any of the cogent points or important names or events, something like that. And then I just had to go through paragraph by paragraph and redo each paragraph. And then I would read it again. And what I was reading out of GPT is kind of the way I was putting it away in my head anyway. And so I like the whole process of simplifying it, because I do think that there's a lot of academia that is simply based on this elitist idea of we speak. And it's funny because this guy is great, Preparata, because on almost every page there's a word, and this guy lives in Italy. I think that he went to school in America in several different schools. He obviously speaks many languages because he uses all of these different words, and he's got a bigger vocabulary than William F. Buckley, if you can believe it. And I learn something new every time I pick up the book. But there's no need for those $3 words. It doesn't make it doesn't make it more readable. It doesn't make it accessible to a bigger audience. When I read those words, what I'm thinking is, oh, you're flexing. Like you picked a word that's more accurate for exactly the idea that you want, but you've eliminated 99% of the people who would be reading this book from knowing what that word is or what that word means. And I want to do the complete opposite. I want to take the most complicated ideas. Actually, what I think is going on, honestly, is that, Scott Adams calls it a confusopoly. I think that what is going on is that you've got a lot of very simple ideas. The energy and fire was energy and the air was mind. The mind and energy ideas are confused to the point where you've got economics. Economics is ridiculously complicated, right? It doesn't need to be that complicated. It's made that complicated on purpose so that the people on the lower two tranches, the true believers and the prisoners of the cave, have no visibility into it. They don't understand it. If you put it in accessible language, then they would understand it. And so the whole game, the word magic of it, is to take simple ideas, make them seem complicated by wrapping them in words that are complicated words, and using that form of magic in order to kind of obfuscate it from people. So what I like to do is to take simple ideas that have been made complicated and then make them simple again, because I think that that's the best way to try to get people, elevate people out of the bottom two tranches and get them to understand how the people above them are thinking.
Well, I think you're always going to have work with those two. You're in simplifying and synthesizing, and they're probably a life, both of those two, a lifetime employment contract for you. And I'll be happy. I'll be happy doing nighttime surveillance on Kislyak, the Russian ambassador's house.
Yeah, you keep doing that, George.
To see when is Butina going to come in with the high heels and who's she going to be with? So right. That's my that's not the ethereal plane. That's the concrete jungle, I guess. But that's the area I'll play in, and we'll get a chance to do a lot of that on Neighborhood News on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9. So
yeah, so that's 9 what Eastern, Western?
9 Eastern.
9 Eastern. 9 Eastern. And George, that's usually when you're tromping around. Is that going to mean you're going to do less tromping around?
No, I'll probably, with our new schedule here, I'll probably travel on Thursdays and weekends and get set up. But no, I'll probably, or off hours. We'll see. So much of the, we've got so much. We've gotten so much man hours and so many thousands of videos and so many thousands of hours and written a lot of Substacks. I think this synthesis thing, Peter, that you focus on so much is the big message here, is to keep refining, keep enriching, and to higher levels of enrichment. So I think I'll be doing a lot of that. Is running to the, like Andy Breitbart used to say, is the 6th interview of Mitt Romney really going to move the needle? That if a Breitbart guy runs out there and gets the 6th interview, maybe if it's a Lee Stranahan, because Lee Stranahan will say, well, what do you think about Ukraine Gate? Every once in a while you'll get somebody in there who throws a real curveball. But for the most part, I don't think I'm going to add a lot of value. Ramaswamy's going to do his own little gig. He's been kicked out by CNN tomorrow night, and it's just going to be Nikki Haley going versus Ron DeSantis. I think I'd rather watch paint dry, right? So I told John O'Loughlin, hey, let's you and I do a show tomorrow night at 8. And let's have the, kind of like a Dave Underdown extravaganza with a Tepka and Kennedy, and let's go at it,
Sure. So where are people going to be able to find you on where is Neighborhood News?
It's currently on my Twitter, and the pointers are on my Twitter, and they wouldn't let us use the YouTube on Monday for the first show, and so we'll have to get you a pointer on Wednesday to the show once YouTube.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to me. All of the things that are going on. I know that Twitter just turned on, or I don't know if they turned it on or whether or not we just discovered it, but it's kind of Periscope-like now. One of the things that Jessica's needing to do is that she's got her phone in her hand, because people who are watching us on Twitter, they can leave comments too, like people used to be able to on Periscope, but it doesn't seem like it's interfacing with StreamYard directly yet. Although I hope that they.
I sent John a couple of messages and he got them when he was doing StreamYard.
Right.
I think it's the first one that you point the StreamYard at is the way you get the comments, because it doesn't know how to
manage more than one,
bring them all in or leave them together. But John does just Twitter alone, or at least that's where he allows people. I think I have 100,000 followers on Twitter, so that's probably where we're going to go in that direction. But
so Neighborhood News Studio will show up on Real George Webb on Twitter.
I'll point to it, so it'll show up. I'll retweet it every day, so you won't have to remember anything. But we do want to have a website where it's all. And what we're doing, Peter, is like it's like 60%.
Don't use Wix anymore. The last time you guys used Wix, don't do that. Use WordPress or something.
Yeah, it's just going to be simple. Here's the last video, and it's going to push down the one before that, so you can just go in a reverse chronological order and click on the videos and watch the videos.
Right.
That's nothing complicated, but half of the show, at least half of the show, is synthesizing what we've already shot. We've been everywhere, and we've shot everything, and there's if there's a square foot of the United States of America that we haven't shot, tell us about it. We'll go there and film it. So, but we do need to do a lot of synthesis, and so I'll probably travel a little less now. And
all right, and if you need any support there, just shout out. And
AI is going to be the thing, AI.
Yeah. Arthur Stone says Adam Curtis films have some great Freud Burnett sections linked at the Duke Report website. Yes, they do. But I got to tell you something, Arthur. I've always wondered why Richard Grove doesn't mention Adam Curtis more often. And that's because after reading Preparata, I'm starting to see how Adam Curtis is a giant limited hangout. I think that he does great stuff. I encourage people to go watch his stuff, but the information that is in oh no, it's not Preparata. It's actually David Livingstone. If you read the Illuminati and Terrorism, or Terrorism and the Illuminati, I don't remember but it's by David Livingstone. And then you watch Adam Curtis's special called The Bitter Lake, which is about FDR and making deals with the Saudi Arabians and the creation of Wahhabism. You will get a completely different history, a telling of events from David Livingstone than you will get from Adam Curtis, because Adam Curtis leaves out all of the parts where the British are involved. He loves to put the Americans in there, and he loves to put the Arabs in there, but where the British are actually going in there and kind of finagling things, where MI6 is getting involved, and where Kim Philby's father gets in there and really starts to mix things up. I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and look again, but I'm not sure how much Philby's father has to do with the Curtis coverage of things. So I like Adam Curtis. I think he's great. And I think that like all other things, you need to go back and look at the books about the things that are going on before you go all in on that stuff. Well, with that, George, I think it is time to say goodbye. And if people want to support George Webb, they can go to buymeacoffee.com/GeorgeWebb1, no E. If you want to support the Duke Report, and if you want to get access to the latest AI project that I'm going to publish in the next couple of days, or I might publish it today, I just have to make sure that it's finished. Then if you go to buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report and you become a member at any level, tin cup and up, I'm going to make this available, the thing that I'm publishing today, available to you. You also get early access to my book, Reframing Reality. You also get other EPUB references that I've created. And once a month, Georgia and I do a Zoom call. So if you want access to that, go to buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report. And if you want to send George something in the mail, you can go to P.O. Box Business Suite Supercenter, 1227 North Peachtree Parkway, Box 189, Peachtree City, Georgia, 30269. And I'm thinking I'm going to get a P.O. Box too, because people have wanted to send us stuff. So with that, I will say next week, George, Tuesday, and we have a interview with Chris Newby. And do we know what day that is? No, we don't. Yes. Anyway, I don't know what it is right now, but I will let you know. And when we know that, then we'll tweet that out. Okay. All right, George. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next Tuesday.